Hello, my name is Michael Jaluli, and as part of my anatomy course, I am to create a video indicating different regions of the sheep brain and also describing the function of each region of the brain. To start with, we'll start with our frontal lobes. Our frontal lobes are located right here. We also have our parietal lobes right over here. Right here are parietal lobes. Behind it, or posterior to it, we have our occipital lobes right here. And we also have our temporal lobes that are located right here, and the other temporal lobe right over here. You'll also notice that we have a longitudinal fissure, the cut that I've made here to the brain. Again, this is our longitudinal fissure separating the two parietal lobes. We also have what's called a gyrus. The gyrus are ridges on the surface of the brain. They're outward fold on the hill. They're an outward fold, almost looking like somewhat of a hill, shaping the brain. And the gyrus is believed to increase in the number of foldings in order to support the neurons within it. So we have our gyrus here, and you can see that they are somewhat like little hills on top of the brain. We have also the sulcus. Major structural features of the brain are the grooves and ridges that give the brain its surface texture. The deeper the sulcus, the more we want to refer to them as fissures. Furthermore, the sulcus help divide the brain into the four different lobes. Lobes being the frontal lobes, again, responsible for emotion. The parietal lobes, more responsible for spatial and awareness. We also have our occipital lobes back here that are responsible for visual, and the temporal for time. One other thing I wanted to make sure that we include here on this video is the cut that you see here. This is what's referred to as the lateral sulcus, and the lateral sulcus divides the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, above from the temporal lobe, and you can see it clearly here with my tool. Moving on to the cerebellum. The cerebellum is this piece back here, and this cerebellum is responsible for motor control, also involved with cognitive function such as attention and language, also involved in coordination, precision, and accurate timing. Again, we have our cerebellum right here. Moving on to the pons, if I were to turn our specimen over, I will show you different regions of the brain, that being on the ventricle side of the sheep brain. We have our pons located right here. This is our pons. I'll remove this so that we can see that this is our pons. And just below that, we have our medulla oblongata. The medulla oblongata is located in the brainstem anterior to the cerebellum. And the medulla oblongata is a cone-shaped mass in the hindbrain, controlling a number of automatic functions. Among other things, this section of the brain helps transfer messages to the spinal cord in the thalamus in the brain from the body, and controls breathing, heart function, blood vessel function, digestion, sneezing, and swallowing. Before I go on, I wanted to describe the pons as well. The pons, again, right here, its function is responsible to relay messages from the cortex to the cerebellum. Without the pons, the brainstem would not be able to function because messages would not be able to be transmitted. Moving on to the olfactory bulbs, we have our olfactory bulbs right here. These are our olfactory bulbs. Two olfactory bulbs. The olfactory bulbs are responsible to transmit smell and information from the nose to the brain, and is thus necessary for proper sense of smell. within the middle of it, we have our olfactory tract, and the olfactory tract connects the olfactory bulb with the cerebral hemispheres. Axons of midal cells pass directly back and forth to the olfactory cortex. So again, we have here our olfactory tract. Moving on to the optic nerves. The optic nerves are adjacent to the tract, the optic nerve being right here, optic nerve right here. We also have the optic chiasm. The optic chiasm is located in the forebrain directly in front of the hypothalamus. Crucial to sight, left and right optic nerves intersect at the chiasm. So again, we have our optic nerve here, and we also have our optic chiasm located right here. Moving on to the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is a pea-sized structure located in the base of the brain, just below the hypothalamus, and attached to it by nerve fibers. It's part of the endocrine system and produces hormones which control other glands as the various body functions, as well as other bodily functions. And our pituitary gland is right here. That being our pituitary gland right there. Moving on, we have the oculomotor nerves. The oculomotor nerve is found in the medial surface of each cerebral pinnacle. The nerve supplies muscle to the eye, and that would be oculomotor nerve. Excuse me, oculomotor nerve right here. I'll lift it up here so that we can see. This is our nerve. I'll move this. Again, we have our oculomotor nerve right here. Moving on, we have the trigmenial. The trigmenial nerve is a nerve that carries both sensory and motor information. The motor component controls the muscles and mastication, and the sensory information from the face and jaw. That being located right here. Very difficult to see, but our trigmenial nerve is located here. The abducens nerve is located right here. Pretty easy to see. We have our abducens nerve right here. Penile body. The penile body is located right in here. Penile body right here. And the penile body is a small endocrine gland that in the vertebrate brain. It produces the serotonin and a hormone that affects sleep patterns in humans. Its shape resembles a tiny pine cone and is located in the epithalamus near the center of the brain between the two hemispheres. Moving on to the sagittal section of the brain, we have the cerebrium. The cerebrium is this vicinity here, this whole top area is cerebrium. And the cerebrium, top of the brain, adjacent to the longitudinal fissure of the cortex, is the largest part of the brain associated with higher brain functions such as thought and action. The cerebral cortex is divided into 4 sections called the lobes: frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal lobes. Moving on to the corpus callosum, located just below the longitudinal fissure. This allows the right and left hemispheres to communicate with one another. And if I were to open up the brain, we would see that corpus is located in here, where the white matter is. Again, the white matter of the corpus callosum. The fornix is located right in here, adjacent to the corpus callosum is the fornix. Lateral ventricle. The ventricles produce and contain cerebral spinal fluid that bathe the brain with spinal cord and the spinal cord to provide protection, buoyancy, waste removal, and endocrine function. Each brain hemisphere contains lateral ventricle, which coverage into the third and fourth ventral continue. So we have our ventricles here. Fourth ventricle, right here. You can clearly see the ventricles right in here. We also have our pons, which I did talk about earlier. Pons is back here. So we talked about our corpus callosum, the white matter that help the brain communicate with right and left hemispheres. We talked about our ventricles, our fourth ventricle located here. We also spoke about our penile body being right here, and the lateral ventricles. Better view of the ventricles, obviously, in this shot right here. We also have the cerebellum with the arbor vitae. The arbor vitae is a tree-shaped white-colored component found in the cerebellum. It is known for its role in motor and sensory information that goes to and from the region of the brain, which is the center of the body nervous system. Due to its shape and structure as well as its functions, its name means tree of life in Latin. So again, we've got that cerebellum here. And that concludes my video.